Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. My name is Kyle Yates, and I am your host. I'm joined by Mike Tagliere. You can find both of us on Twitter at KyleYNFL and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, what is up?
Oh, nothing much, man. It's good to have you on as a host. It's been a while since you've hosted a show with just me and you, and we brought on a good guest for today's show, and I know that because I actually did a podcast with him earlier this week where him and I argued a little bit, and I happen to think that that's going to happen again on today's show.
Oh, cool. Well, I'll be in the middle of that. That'll be fun. So hey, we've got Chris Raybon from the Action Network and the award-winning Action Network podcast. He can be found on Twitter at Chris Raybon. Chris, thanks for jumping on.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to talk some football, and as Mike said, yeah, we'll probably go back and forth, and that's what the people need to hear. They don't need to hear the same takes from everybody. We need some disagreement, so let's get to it.
Yeah, buddy.
It's what the people want. All right. Well, hey, before we dive in, I just have to talk about this insane giveaway we've got going on right now, guys. Listen to this, okay? A signed Davante Adams helmet, a $200 gift card for Pristine Auction, a $200 gift card to Porter Road Butcher, a package of fantasy football goods for your league's champion and last place loser from Trophy Smack. And I've got 2 trophies from Trophy Smack now, guys, and they are incredible. And a 1-month subscription to Fubo TV. We'll be giving away this grand prize package away once we hit 7,000 reviews on Apple Podcasts. We're at 6,500 right now. In addition, we are going to give a bonus to the winner if they are a subscriber to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros. The bonus prize will be a Zoom call with our fantasy analysts. To enter the giveaway, just leave an honest review for our show on Apple Podcasts. Take a screenshot of that review and also take a screenshot showing that you subscribe to our YouTube channel to qualify for the bonus prize and send those to contest@fantasypros.com. Tags, do you have anything to add here, buddy?
Yeah, I just want to say, guys, like, reviews mean a whole lot to us, and, they're the reason that we're planning to put out more shows this season. I don't know if you guys know that yet, but we're actually going to be adding shows this NFL season to our schedule because of the support that you guys have given us. They do help. The reviews help us make us a better podcast, and it's really a simple way to show your support. A couple minutes is all it takes. We read all those reviews, and we take listener feedback into account. You can help us support us even more by heading over to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros and clicking on the subscribe button there, because we're going to be doing live streams throughout the season. Sunday mornings, me and Dan are going to be on there doing things. Yates is going to be doing things throughout the season. So guys, make sure you head over there, check it out. It really does help us out. And on top of that, you get entered in to win these contests. And even if you don't win this one, you're entered to win all future contests. We do them all the time. So thank you.
Absolutely. For more details on this contest, just head over to fantasypros.com/contest. Again, that's fantasypros.com/contest. And also, I want to make sure that everyone knows about our Instagram account. We have a ton of helpful, easy-to-read advice along with concise, quick-hitting videos that can help you crush your draft. So check it out, guys, over at instagram.com/fantasypros, and make sure to hit the follow button.
Hey, Yates, right, guys. real quick, while you're on
ahead,
Instagram, I think I want to get your guys' take on this, because I think I always try and do it this time of the year because I feel like we have new listeners coming back, or new listeners in general, and I want to make sure people know just how important social media is, especially in a year like this. Like, on Twitter, if you don't have a Twitter account, you're already behind a little bit. If you don't have an Instagram account, obviously, we're trying to post more content on there, but I know that Twitter, I've created that legitimately when I started playing fantasy football just to get information. If a player's going to be out on Sunday, we're going to tweet it out. We're going to let you know. You're going to be in the know. It's more important now than ever. You can set up notifications and all that stuff. So make sure you guys do that. Create a Twitter account. Follow us on there. I'm at Mike Tagliere NFL. Yates is at Kyle Y NFL. And Raybon, what's your Twitter handle?
At Chris Raybon. My name.
Yeah, we're all pretty active on there. So make sure you do that. I just want to make sure you guys have every advantage possible, because I think this season more than ever, fantasy football will be decided on Sunday mornings.
For sure. That is for sure. All right, guys. Well, hey, let's dive into the content today. We are looking at wide receiver rankings. We did a running backs ranking show earlier on this week, and so we're going to be breaking, just like that one, we're going to be breaking these down into tiers and each discussing one player that we like and dislike relative to their ECR, which stands for Expert Consensus Ranking. The first tier we're talking about today is the reliable performers. These are the guys that you draft, you plug into your lineup, and you just forget about them. You don't even think about moving them unless it's their bye week, right? So let's just go around the table here. I'll go Tags first, and then Chris, and then I'll wrap it up. and discuss a player that we like in this range, which is wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 18 in ECR. Tags, you're up first.
You know, Yates, I have to say first off that I'm a little disappointed in you. And I have to say that because you sent me your notes. So basically Yates Yates is so prepared. He actually sent me his list of players that he was going to talk about. Usually I don't get that. Usually I'm surprised when I see the list of players that's being talked about. But he sent me his, and I'm kind of ticked off, Yates. Have you abandoned ship on Calvin Ridley? Because Calvin Ridley is clearly the right pick here. I mean, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 16 or 17 right now. ECR is in the same range. I am dumbfounded why Calvin Ridley is lasting this long in drafts, and he's absolutely the best value right now. I'm going to throw a stat out here, and I know I'm kind of giving away what I'm going to be talking about, when we get to the other side of this conversation, the players that we hate at their current ranking. But Calvin Ridley, last year alone, was a wide receiver 2 or better 61.5% of the time. Okay? That's a good number. Okay? That's in the top 12 among wide receivers. All right, so he was already a wide receiver 2. He came with wide receiver 1 upside. We know that. Did you know Tyreek Hill has never had a season, like going back, it's not just last year, it's not the year before. He has never had a season where he's posted wide receiver 2 or better numbers 53% of the time. Calvin Ridley is more consistent. He doesn't come with the spikes that Tyreek Hill does. And I understand Tyreek Hill helps you win weeks at times, but Calvin Ridley is consistent as a wide receiver 2, and he has that wide receiver 1 upside. Obviously, Julio Jones, now 31 years old. I love Julio, but at some point we have to say, we're going to see a passing of the torch. And Calvin Ridley has already been performing as a borderline wide receiver 1 when you break down the numbers. So getting him in middle of the wide receiver 2 tier, I mean, it's stealing. Calvin Ridley in the 4th round, sometimes 5th round is easy money.
Yeah, well, so I feel like I'm on blast here, but I left Calvin Ridley for you. So there was another guy that I liked. I left him for you, and I'm the one getting blasted on the podcast. Jeez. So all right. Well, I obviously love Calvin Ridley. We've talked about him a ton on this podcast earlier. So, but Chris, what do you think here with Calvin Ridley? Do you think that he has this wide receiver 1 potential this season, or is he someone that you kind of feel like he's right in line with ECR where he's at 16, 17?
I'm a tags. Calvin Ridley is a guy that I would have mentioned as well. I got another guy who I think Tags actually dislikes, so we'll probably argue about this, but Calvin Ridley, I'm all in on Calvin Ridley. He's extremely exciting as a draft pick. He's going, as you mentioned, in the 4th round in most drafts, and you look at his percentage of routes per dropback, and routes are just so important when you're trying to project receivers and tight ends, just because there's not a lot separating a lot of these guys, and sometimes it just comes down to their routes and their efficiency on those routes. And Ridley was a guy that was always in that 75 to 80% range as long as Mohamed Sanu is there. Then we started seeing him be an every down player once Sanu left. Now he also got injured at one point, and so didn't finish out a game or 2 in there, but I expect Calvin Ridley to be an every down player, and that's something that not even Julio Jones really is. Julio's usually around 80, 85%. So Calvin Ridley has tremendous upside. He should be in there on wide receiver, 2 wide sets, and Atlanta threw 51 more passes than any team in the league last year. So even when you factor in regression, Ridley is set up to be the Chris Godwin of this year.
Mm-hmm. I was literally just about to ask that question, and I'm so glad that you did. Is Calvin Ridley the Chris Godwin of this year? Where we looked at Chris Godwin ahead of time last year, and we said, okay, based on everything that's lining up, with Jameis Winston as the quarterback, airing it out, Bruce Arians in town, they're going to be throwing the ball a ton. Everything kind of lines up for Calvin Ridley with those same narratives. Again, 684 pass attempts last season. Am I projecting anywhere near that? No. But can they get there again? Yeah. Have you seen their running game with Todd Gurley, Brian Hill? What happens if Todd Gurley struggles with injury?
Yeah, that's a problem.
They're not going to be able to run the ball as effectively as they have been. So they're going to be throwing the ball a ton. And if I have Calvin Ridley in my top 10 currently, and I'm projecting them for around 620 pass attempts, what happens if they get up to 680, 700, somewhere around there? I think he's being drafted below his floor right now, which is saying something.
Yep. And I just want to say, Yates, you're a step behind me again. I posted an early bold predictions article back in January. It was actually end of January where I said that Calvin Ridley was going to be the 2020 version of Chris Godwin.
Well, humble brag there. Okay,
Obviously.
so all right. Well, let's move on from Calvin Ridley. We all are in agreement there that he is someone that we should all be drafting, and this guy that we really like in this range. Chris, let's go to you. Who is someone that you really like in this range?
The number 18 guy, Cooper Kupp, the guy that should be going, in my opinion, ahead of Robert Woods. I have him ranked 13th. I'm pretty sure Tag disagrees with me. Maybe you do too, Kyle. But you look at what Cooper Kupp's done in this league since he came in. He's been extremely consistent from his rookie year. Last year, he was 7th in PPR points per game. And that's coming off a devastating injury that happened pretty late in the year before. And, you know, that's saying something. The year before, he was 15th. He was 4th overall in half PPR points per game last year. Stayed healthy. I think the only reason you saw him less on the field down the stretch is because the Rams' playoff hopes are slipping away, and you had what's his name, Tyra Higby. How could I forget Tyra Higby? Kind of doing some work, and so you went with some more 2 tight end sets. But I don't think that in any way is suggesting that like Kupp is going to be devalued in this offense. In fact, I think he's the offensive centerpiece. He's the centerpiece of that pass game. He's the guy that not only will win over the middle, but he's the guy that when Sean McVay schemes up his pass game on a weekly basis, Kupp is the guy that gets schemed open, which is why we've seen Robert Woods kind of go through stretches too where, you know, he's kind of disappears and then he has these monster stretches. But Kupp consistently is a guy that's going to get schemed open all areas of the field. That's why even when he had, you know, Kupp, quote unquote, had a down, you know, second half of the year. Well, his down second half of the year came with a touchdown in 5 straight games to close out the year. He's always been an effective red zone receiver. He, you know, this is a guy that's another guy that's being drafted below his, you know, where he's finished in points per game the last 2 years. So I really like Kupp going that late, sometimes going behind Woods. Mike, tell me why I'm wrong.
I'm not going to say you're wrong. What I'm saying about, so basically someone's going to be extremely wrong on this subject though. And I don't necessarily think it's you. I think Jared Goff is better when Cooper Kupp's on the field. I think that's the bottom line. And like the growth in Cooper Kupp has to start with Cooper Kupp being on the field. And to do that, you have to go away from that 12 personnel. They can't do the 2 tight end sets all the time. So it's either Gerald Everett is probably going to disappoint.
He's going to disappoint.
Not Gerald Everett. Tyler Higby.
Out of the picture. Please don't.
Well, Tyler Higby will be on the field obviously as one tight end. But if you go back to where before Everett even suffered that injury, he was the one getting most of the playing time. He was the one they drafted in the 2nd round when they had Tyler Higby on the roster. So there's a lot of weird things going on with the Rams offense right now. Van Jefferson is not going to be able to just walk in and replace Brandon Cooks. So there's a lot of targets up for grabs in this offense. But it all comes back to this, is saying that Cooper Kupp is someone that people doubted coming out of college. They're doubting him again now. But anytime he's on the field, he kind of like proves you otherwise. And knowing that he's kind of slot only, they need him on the field. So they need to run that 11 personnel. So I do like Cooper Kupp. I love the fact that so it depends on what draft you're in, because his average draft position right now is actually wide receiver 13. That's too expensive.
That's exactly where I have him. I think that's right. I think the consensus is wrong and the average is right. Because you so, like, all right, you're gonna like, even in PPR standard, he scores touchdowns. So it's not like he's a PPR only guy. He scores touchdowns. He scored 5, 6, 10. So that's, you know, like in 6 came in 8 games. So he scores touchdowns. He gets yards. He's averaged 14.2, 12.4 yards per catch. Like, I don't see anything that he doesn't do that would negate, relegate him, to one type of format.
Here's the thing with Cooper Kupp is that the difference of his first half of last year, where he was the wide receiver 2, weeks 1 through 9. Then weeks 9 through 17, he's a wide receiver 31, and that's when we saw the Rams offense switch philosophies and go towards heavy 12 personnel. So, which is 1 running back, 2 tight ends on the field, which means that you have Brandon Cooks at that point, Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods always on the field. When they went to 11 personnel, Cooper Kupp came on as a slot receiver. Cooper Kupp's not playing outside. So now it's the question of, okay, are they going to stick with what worked for them last year? Because it did work. Like the offense was producing, like they were competitive in games.
Did their schedule dictate that though? I mean, they played they played the Cardinals twice. They played the Seahawks in there. It was a match made in heaven for Tyler Higby. Like there was a lot of injuries.
Yeah. So the thing with him at the wide receiver 13, that's too high for me. That's too high for me because I think that's where with someone who I have to spend that draft capital on, I don't want to have these question marks surrounding them. Right? Does that make sense? So, like, there's a ton. Does Cooper Kupp have the talent? Absolutely. Has he been phenomenal in the NFL? Absolutely. Has he been a great fantasy receiver? Absolutely. Everything dictates that he should be drafted there. But then there's this thing hanging over our heads from the back end of last year where it says, I don't know if I want to invest that significant draft capital into someone at that spot.
It just doesn't bake in risk is all. So I'm not, for the record, I have him at wide receiver 17, so I think I'm in line with ECR here. But the thing is, like, you have to factor in the risk about these players. Like, the risk surrounding Adam Thielen is a lot less than it is for someman like Cooper Kupp. The risk around DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, these are guys that
I disagree.
They don't really...
I disagree on Thielen and Ridley. I mean, not Ridley. Who was the other guy you just mentioned? Moore. I think
DJ
Moore and Thielen have more risk. Like, what would you say about Thielen that would make him less risky?
Well, because he's the clear-cut number one. There's like literally zero risk. That team is going to go up in pass attempts. The defense is going through somewhat of a rebuild. So with Thielen, my only concerns with Thielen, and the reason I'm not as high on Thielen as some other people in the industry, is because I have worries about his back. I'm someone that's had actually a fusion on my back. I understand that back injuries can flare up at any time, and that could really impact your lineup. So that's the worry, and that's why I have Thielen at 15. But when he's on the field and Cooper Kupp's on the field, the question marks that I have around Cooper Kupp have nothing to do with an injury. It has to do with like the scheme of the offense and whether or not he's going to be on the field as much as he was in the first half of last year, because the first 8 games, as Yates mentioned, first 8 games, he posted 5 100-yard games. The rest of the season,
dominant.
He didn't post any. He didn't get there any.
That's fair.
So,
right.
But like, okay, here's the thing. It's like every receiver can go through droughts. I think Kupp's were like a clear saying like, okay, we need to hold him back a little. Like, he's always been the centerpiece of the offense. He's Goff's best friend, for goodness sake. But my biggest thing is like the second half of the season when he was playing limited snaps, 6 catches, 4 catches, 6 catches, 4 catches, 7 catches, a touchdown in 5 straight. Like, even on think about the upside. Like, he could be that player and he still could hit his like ECR or ADP just with that production. And now think about the upside of him playing his usual amount of snaps, because he played 60 mid-60s in slot last year. So it's not as if he won't ever play on the outside. Like,
right.
I just don't see
but
the
he's
risk
not as
there.
productive on the outside.
He's not. Right. He averages about 2.2 yards per route in the slot, and it's a little under 2 outside. But the point remains, like, Thielen, a back injury and a low volume offense, like, that's a legit concern. Like, compared to a guy who we're saying, oh, will he be on the field like 70% of the time or 90% of the time? But a guy who still put up numbers even when he's on the field 70% of the time.
Yeah, this all comes down to what we believe should happen with Cooper Kupp being on the field, right? We're in complete agreement, I think, in that situation. But then it's just going to be, okay, now with a full offseason, does Sean McVay alter the offense to then get Cooper Kupp back on the field, which he, again, we've mentioned it, and I don't want to just keep beating the dead horse. We're saying, like, he wasn't on the field as much towards the last half of last year. So, but this kind of just spins right into my guy, is Robert Woods, because we're looking at Robert Woods and we're saying that 90 receptions last year, 139 freaking targets, 90 receptions, 1,134 receiving yards, and only 2 touchdowns. Previous seasons, he had 5 and 6. His touchdown production was extremely low last year, below average, and he still finishes the wide receiver 17. He's currently going outside of that in ADP. He's wide receiver 24, ECR wide receiver 17. This guy is going to drastically outperform his ADP, regardless of whether Cooper Kupp is on the field or not, right? Like, that is kind of Robert Woods is going to bounce back because of his touchdowns are going to be his touchdown production is going to bounce back. So I think I really, really love Robert Woods right now at ECR wide receiver 17, and I can get him in the same range of Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 4, or round 4, round 5. I'm taking that every chance that I get. So, Tags, we've talked about Robert Woods, so I want to get Chris's opinion here. Chris, with you having Cooper Kupp up at wide receiver 13, does that lower your, confidence in drafting Robert Woods? Where do you have Woods ranked?
I have Woods. Let me make sure I have the exact right number. I have him at 20. So I have him a little lower. He has been, I think Robert Woods is another guy that if he's going like 24th, he's undervalued as well. In general, this Rams offense is undervalued. But my numbers just in terms of the the per route efficiency. And even with, knocking Kupp, factoring in that he may not be on the field as much as Woods, because I have Woods projected to run about 93% of the routes, and I have Kupp down, in the mid to low 80s. So, even with that, Kupp projects out as a more efficient player for me, and I think Woods is a guy this year that he's still being undervalued, but I'm a little more in line with consensus, or I guess I'm below expert consensus on him above ADP, which kind of evens out. So I'm not overly excited about Woods. I don't think he's as good of a player as Kupp. I don't think he's as good of a player as many of the other wide receivers he's being drafted around, but he's good enough, and he's in an offense where I think it's going to be Woods, it's going to be Kupp, it's going to be Higby. I think those are going to be the guys regardless, and it will probably be a high-volume offense, because what I think is happening is that they're transitioning to a more quick-hitting attack, and they already were extremely high pass-volume offense last year. And Higby getting the job over Everett and being more productive. Van Jefferson, a more short to intermediate route runner, being drafted. Probably going to replace Reynolds sooner than later. It just all kind of, goes to, okay, it's going to be another, high volume, quick hitting offense. That's good for Woods. It's good for Kupp. It's good for everyone involved. So, I'm cool with drafting Woods right there around number 20 ahead of ADP.
Cool. Tags, if you loaded up in your draft, you loaded up on running back early, you got those top tier guys, would you be comfortable with Robert Woods as your wide receiver 1?
Is my 1? Ideally not. I don't think that he's a bad play for a wide receiver 1. A lot of smart guys have come on this podcast and talked about Woods as having him as a top 12 wide receiver. I think Sean Coroner is actually one of those guys that, Chris works with. I don't want to put him in that tier because he's a guy that's never scored more than 6 touchdowns. So it's almost like you're relying on those yards. And he is a very consistent guy. I just prefer a guy that's consistent with a little bit more upside than him as my wide receiver 1. However, I've been able to get Robert Woods as my wide receiver 3 without going even crazy running back heavy. In the 5th round, getting someone like Robert Woods is a steal to me, because that means you could have gotten 2 top tier running backs, 2 other wide receivers that you're confident in, and then grabbing Robert Woods in the 5th, he's an absolute steal. He probably should be going in the 4th, though.
I agree. All right, Tags, let's flip the table here. Let's flip the conversation, and let's go to these guys that we dislike relative to their ECR. Let's have you kick off the conversation here.
Yeah, I already mentioned it. In regards to ECR, and this has nothing. This is not me saying that I don't like Tyreek Hill as a player, or I don't think he's a good fantasy asset. I do think he's a good fantasy asset. I do think he's a very good player. I think he's attached to Patrick Mahomes in one of the best offenses in the league, if not the best. And I'm projecting Mahomes for a lot of touchdowns this year. However, when you're drafting a player in the 1st round, which is where Hill's ADP is, he's going as, I think, the 9th or 10th player off the board on an average draft position. You need a player there that's going to be consistent. And there's a 3 wide receiver tier. If you want to put Tyreek Hill at number 4, I'm cool with that. But again, he's still not a 1st round pick. Because Michael Thomas, Davante Adams, and Julio Jones, those are 3 wide receivers that are about as consistent as they come year in, year out. And again, Tyreek Hill is going to have those massive performances that you're going to be like, oh, I love having Tyreek Hill on my team. And then he's going to have other performances where he leaves you with, 10 PPR points, and you're kind of like, well, that's not ideal. Hopefully my wide receiver 2 or my wide receiver 3 picked up. Like, if you have Tyreek Hill, having someone on your roster like Robert Woods makes a whole lot of sense, because you need balance throughout your roster. So understand that if you draft someone like Tyreek Hill, you have to balance out your roster. You're going to need to get some more consistency in there, because again, when you compare his numbers, because I did this article series that I do, it's called Boom Bust and Everything in Between. It shows the consistency that each player has and how often they delivered those numbers. Again, Tyreek Hill has performed as a wide receiver 2 or better just 44.2% of his games. Over his career. It was just 41% in last year, but again, he did have a game where he left early. There's things that factor into that, but if you put him right next to Amari Cooper last year, their wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 numbers are almost identical, and they both average 7.4 targets per game. So Tyreek Hill is not getting the... That's the reason. If Tyreek Hill was getting the 10 targets per game that Adams, Thomas, and Julio got, Tyreek Hill would probably be the number 1 fantasy wide receiver, because he's one of the most efficient wide receivers we've ever seen play the game. But when you're getting those 7.4 targets per game, your consistency is going to struggle. So again, it's not that I don't like Tyreek Hill, because I know Chris has him as his number 2 wide receiver, but I am unwilling to draft him where he's going right now in drafts. If you get him in the 2nd round, like middle of the 2nd round, you pair him with a stud running back that's going to be consistent for you, I have no issue with that. And I'm arguing semantics here because it really just depends on where you're going to be drafting. But if you draft Tyreek Hill over Davante Adams or Julio Jones, I just think you're making a mistake in terms of what the stability that those guys bring to your roster.
I mean, Tyreek Hill absolutely has the talent to finish as a wide receiver 5. I mean, even higher, right? Or wide receiver 5 or higher. And he could certainly end up there by the end of the season, but his consistency week in and week out might leave you with a bad taste in your mouth relative to where you drafted him. But Chris, it sounds like you disagree. Where are you at?
I totally disagree. He's my wide receiver 2.
All right,
I think this is so here's where I think we differ, and it is kind of nitpicky, but I think breaking up wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 performances, like it has these weird cutoffs, because look at Tyreek Hill's over the last 3 years, and I'll use PPR just because it's kind of easy for people to visualize the most. But he's last year, and remember, he left the game early. He had 2 games during the regular season where he was in under 10 PPR points, single digits, which is when you start to worry. In 2018, he played a full season. He had 3 such games. And then in 2017, which was pre-Mahomes, he had four games like that with Alex Smith. So, like, this is, like, maybe he's, like, just missing that wide receiver 2 cutoff, and it's, like, some wide receiver 3-ish performances. But at the end of the day, like, getting that many double-digit performances and still getting those boom weeks, more so than pretty much any receiver in the league is capable of, with, mind you, room to grow in the target department. To me, there's like there's no real downside to Hill, because you're still getting that high floor. Like I consider double digit, to be a high floor. Like if you're not getting there consistently, then I start to worry. But he's getting there. And then you look at his ceiling. Like, okay, 7.4 targets, and he's right up there year in, year out. 11th in per game points last year, even with the leaving the game early. 5th the year before. Devonte Adams has to like max out his targets to do that, because he's averaging 12 yards a catch. Like Julio Jones is going on 31. I think Julio should go ahead of Adams too, to be honest. But so I actually have Adams 4th, and it's nothing against Adams per se, but it's just like, look at where Aaron Rodgers is at in his career. Look at what Adams has to do to kind of max out to get to just like Adams is getting over 10 targets a game, and he, just to kind of put up production that lands him in the same tier with Tyreek Hill. Adams has had 1,000-yard season, and he's fallen like 3 yards short twice, in his career. And that's because he's just not a super efficient receiver, through no fault of his own. He's amazing at getting open, because it's amazing that he does, considering all the attention he gets. But just for context, Tyreek Hill's already at 2 1,000-yard seasons. It's just like there's so much more upside to me with Hill, with a limited. The floors are exactly limited. If you want to like nitpick between, okay, like he scored 10 points, which is a wide receiver 3 performance, versus like 13, which is a wide receiver 2, and it is as his floor sometimes. Okay, I get it, but I just don't think that's as like difference making as like him being attached to Mahomes, combined with just the room for growth to where he could be an 8-9 target guy, because Kelsey's also above 30. Like a lot of different things could happen, in that Chiefs offense that could get Hill to that normal wide receiver 1 target range as well. So like, and he's got the talent for it. So like that's right. Where I'm at with Hill.
Yeah, and Davante Adams, I just want to say that, I've heard the argument about him having the 1,000-yard season. If you were he played 12 games last year, ended with 997. He was on a 16-game pace, was 1329. He had 1386 the year before. So I think the role he's grown into as the number 1 receiver with Jordy Nelson gone, it's clear that he's going to, if he's on the field, he's getting 1,300 yards, probably 1,400. He has a shot for double-digit touchdowns. I don't have an issue if somebody wants to draft Davante Adams over Michael Thomas. Honestly, if you compare Davante Adams' 2018 season to Michael Thomas's 2019, Davante Adams was actually probably better. He didn't have a single game that year with less than 16 PPR points. Like, Davante Adams was a stud in 2018. And again, this offense, I do worry about it under Matt LaFleur, but it was the same situation last year, right? Like, fortunately, we have another year in the offense, so maybe Aaron Rodgers gets a little more comfortable. But Davante Adams is just super. And by the way, and I'm going to throw this out, I'm going to end this right here, but Tyreek Hill, yes, he gives you upside, yes. So the boom category is 25 or more PPR points. Tyreek Hill has hit that mark 20% of his games. That's actually quite ridiculous. It's right there with Jerry Rice, Calvin Johnson. Julio Jones has hit that mark 25.6% of his games.
Jeez. Love Julio. I think Adams is the odd man out, and it's not because, again, it's just not because of anything to do with him, but he averages for his career 7.5 yards per target. He's been in 7.6 to 8.2. That's not because of him, it's because of Aaron Rodgers. He's got to max out his targets just to get to places that like Julio and Tyreek could get to by being good. Like good
right.
with good quarterbacks, I should say. Like and in Michael Thomas, he has Drew Brees, completing 75% of his balls. And guess what? If Brees gets hurt or gets, declines suddenly, he's got Jameis Winston. So like to me, I actually see the most downside risk in Adams, just because of, it sounds crazy to say, but Aaron Rodgers in that offense.
That's very fair. Okay, so Tags, if we throw 2019 out the window, right? Because Tyreek Hill missed 4 games, right? Chris mentioned that I think you said he left a game early too. Yep. So, and then Patrick Mahomes obviously was dealing with the ankle injury. He wasn't fully himself, but yet he was still incredible, which is terrifying for this season. In 2018, Tyreek Hill, 137 targets, 87 receptions, freaking 17 yards per reception and 12 touchdowns. Yeah. Like, I get what Chris is saying about, like, Devonte Adams absolutely has to finish as a top 3 wide receiver on the back of 170, 160 targets. Tyreek Hill can do it on the back of 130. So if we didn't have 2019 in our minds, would we be drafting Tyreek Hill as a top 2 wide receiver?
Again, I have him at number 4, so I'm not like going crazy saying like you can't draft Tyreek Hill. I think he is a good receiver, and I think it's great to have someone like that in your lineup because you feel good about it. It's just a matter of where he's being drafted. Knowing that you have to use the number 10 pick in your drafts, which is his current ADP, to get him, that's the part where I just can't do.
Yeah, and for context, I'm at wide receiver 5 with a very narrow gap at wide receiver 4. So I'm right in this conversation. I think we are all in agreement that Tyreek Hill is a phenomenal player. It's just going to come down to how you want to construct your roster.
Correct.
So, okay, so let's move on. So, Chris, who's the guy that you dislike in this range?
So, in terms of, like, I think that Allen Robinson at 8 is high. And I was very bullish on Robinson heading into last year. I thought, he was going in his prime, age-wise. He was another year removed from the ACL. So I really liked him. I thought he was going way too low. And now he has, it kind of comes to fruition. He has this great season. He's top 3 in targets. But now I feel like we're overrating last season. And there are a couple of things I think to worry about with Robinson. And the first is that, if you're taking him 8th over, like Mike Evans and Juju and, Odell, like all these guys, even Calvin Ridley, like there's the possibility, even though it wasn't last year, there's the possibility that the Bears are more of a low volume pass offense. They still have a good defense. Last year, I think they had a somewhat unlucky season just in how things started to go, and they ended up passing the ball a little more than they would have liked. He averaged under 12 yards a catch last year, did Robinson. So he was a high volume guy, but I expected him to be a lot more efficient than that. I thought that he still had some of that explosiveness in him that got him to 1,400 yards in year 2. But I don't know if that's still there. He can still be a high volume guy, but he's another guy who I think has to kind of max out his volume, especially given, his quarterback situation isn't great. The defense is good, which is also another kind of red flag anytime you're looking to like maximize your ceiling. So I think we've kind of seen the best of Robinson, both in that second year in Jacksonville and then last year in terms of fantasy. And now people are kind of really excited to buy back in, and maybe, the target projection after last year is high for people, but I just don't think he has. I think he's kind of maxed out, and we're kind of paying for past production at this point. I think he's more in line with where like Robert Woods is. He's closer to Robert Woods for me than Kenny Golladay and DeAndre Hopkins, who he's going right after.
Tags, I have him at wide receiver 6, so I'm obviously in disagreement here with Chris. Mm-hmm. But so where are you at with Allen Robinson for this season?
So obviously, it sounds like Chris just tends to, if he has a tiebreaker, he's going to move a wide receiver down based on their quarterback play, and I can't really can't fault that. If you like Patrick Mahomes, you want to move someone up. If you don't like Mr. Trubisky, whatever. And I know a lot of people have talked about Nick Foles is going to be the best quarterback that Allen Robinson's ever played with. I don't even know if that's the case, to be honest.
That's so depressing.
Nick Foles has been trash outside of Philly, guys. Like, I hate to break it to everybody listening. If you were to put his numbers side by side with Trubisky's, you'd be like, who's the better quarterback?
They're
again?
he's like 1%, and I actually did look it up. So like I compared the numbers and accuracy in various things, and he's like literally like whatever Trubisky is, Foles is like a tick higher. So like it's like 1 to 5% better. And
that's overall. That's
right.
overall with his Philly days and with the Chip Kelly days and like that stuff. So Matt Nagy doesn't call an offense like Doug Peterson. I think we've learned that. I think we have to stop assuming that Matt Nagy's going to do the same thing that Andy Reid did back in Kansas City. I think it does help Allen Robinson, however, and Anthony Miller to that extent, because they both now have a double the shot of getting good quarterback play. Because if Trubisky's not playing well, like, going back to last year, he didn't play well at all, then they're going to bring in Foles. And it's almost like you have two chances.
It's not like they're going down to Chase Daniel.
Correct. Yeah. So I would say Foles is definitely an upgrade in that aspect, but I'm just saying he has two chances for competent quarterback play, and he's clearly the go-to guy here. We can't pretend that Jimmy Graham's going to walk in and get a whole bunch of targets. Taylor Gabriel's gone. He was getting a lot of targets, and we have to kind of figure out how this offense works. And, they didn't add anything in the backfield. David Montgomery's still going to get his workload. Tariq Cohen, those are two undervalued guys, but looking at this receiver unit, I just don't see how Allen Robinson doesn't see 140 targets. And if you're getting 140 targets, really no matter who the quarterback is, you're probably going to finish in wide receiver 1 territory, and Allen Robinson has already shown the ability to do that with bad quarterbacks. So I think Robinson's safe, and so I'm kind of taking the cop out here as I'm probably in between you guys. I think he's a safe wide receiver 1 to have on your fantasy team. I do not think I don't think he gives you top 3 upside at the wide receiver position. So if you get him in the 3rd round, I'm cool with that. If you want to take him in the 2nd, it's probably a little rich for my blood.
Yeah, I mean, for context, Segs, and that's crazy that you threw out that number. I have him down for exactly 140 targets. So that's my reasoning. And I think he's one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. So yeah. I think that even despite what he's been playing with, at the quarterback position over the previous however many seasons with Blake Bortles and, Trubisky, and he's proven that he can still succeed and he can still win. So even if Trubisky struggles, I think he was still competent. We saw him still be competent last year. And if Foles comes in and can be even better than Trubisky and can keep the offense on track, that means more scoring opportunities. So I like him this year. Obviously, that is the case. All right, guys, let's try to speed this up because we're 30 minutes in and we're still in tier 1. So I just want to get your guys' opinion on this really quick from my player that I dislike. It's Mike Evans. Yep. And Mike Evans relative to his ECR, which is wide receiver 9, I have him down at wide receiver 16. So this is purely just looking at, can Tom Brady at 43 years old now at this point, I think Chris Godwin is the number 1 receiver in this room from a fantasy perspective. From the slot, I think he's going to get all the targets he can handle. Then it's just, where are those targets going to be with Tom Brady, and is he going to utilize Evans downfield? Where are you guys at with Evans? We don't need to spend a ton of time diving into him, but just where are you at with him? Let's go tags and then Chris.
I'm at wide receiver 13. I am 100% with you. A lot of people want to talk about his last year's numbers and that he was a wide receiver 1 despite missing 3 games. He wasn't a wide receiver 1. It wasn't even really close. But in terms of that boom bust and everything in between article, Mike Evans was a wide receiver 2 or better just 38.5% of the time. He was a wide receiver 3 or better 53.8% of the time. Yates, I'm going to be honest with you. If you hadn't put Mike Evans on your list, I would have used him instead of Tyreek Hill because Tyreek Hill is actually a really good football player who plays with Patrick Mahomes, whereas Mike Evans has been really, really target dependent over the course of his career, and with Tom Brady, I think he loses some of those targets. So I am 100% in sync with you on this one. Chris, what about you?
I have him top 10. I think he's durable. He's done it with he's gotten 1,000 yards every year of his career. And he's done it with some lower target counts, though. It's not always been he's 136, 138, 118 last couple years. I think Jameis Winston does lower the absence of Winston does lower his ceiling. But I think he's a really good receiver, and Brady hasn't had a guy like that on the outside in some time. So I think Evans will be just fine. He's safe. He's not as exciting as he was with Winston, but he's one of the best receivers in the league, and he's still got a pretty efficient quarterback. So I'm not worried about him, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, I'll say that. If I can get Mike Evans as my wide receiver 2, I'd be ecstatic because I think he still does present some upside. His talent level is there, but you're not getting him there right now. You're getting him as a wide. You have to draft him as your wide receiver 1.
Yep.
All right, guys, let's move on to the next tier. Wide receiver 19 to wide receiver 36 in this range of ECR. These are the guys that we're classifying as high upside options with question marks. Okay, so these guys who could become top tier options, but there are serious questions surrounding them. Same thing as before, we'll just go around the room with the players that we like in this range first. Tags, let's go to you.
Yeah, I'm going to be quick with this one. I mean, AJ Green is someone I talked about a lot on this show and someone that I'm going to own a lot of. You know, the risk associated with him, I understand it, and I have to bake that into where I have him, and that's why I have him at wide receiver 23. But he's being drafted basically sometimes outside the top 30 receivers, which is just insane. He's about to play with the best quarterback of his career in an offense that clearly is going to have a lot of pass attempts. That defense that's in a rebuild mode. They have a whole new linebacking core. There's just a lot of things that are going through it. So I'm going to mention Tyler Boyd in this range too, because I think that he's a tremendous value, and I know it's 2 Bengals wide receivers, but Tyler Boyd currently ADP wide receiver 33. The guy's been a top 24 receiver each of the last 2 years. He racked up almost 150 targets last year in the first year of Zach Taylor's offense. The offensive line gets better. The quarterback play gets better. The consistency gets better. There's just so much going on in this Bengals offense, and it's a difficult offense to contain considering who they have on the field when they're healthy. And this is basically why I wanted to mention both AJ Green and Boyd, is because if you don't like AJ Green for whatever reason, you don't like him. Let's pretend that he's not going to stay healthy. He's 32 years old now. He's not going to, whatever you believe. And if you don't like AJ Green, draft Tyler Boyd. That's all I will say. I'm actually okay to draft both of them on my fantasy team. I really am at the cost that they're going, because I think they're both going to outperform their ADPs. But if you don't like AJ Green for whatever reason, if you're rolling your eyes every time I say AJ Green, draft Tyler Boyd. Seriously. I don't even want to say anymore because I've talked about these guys so much.
Chris, who's your guy for disliking here?
Disliking.
You are the guy who
I'm
likes.
sorry, liking.
I was like,
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
we're
liking.
pretty negative here. I'll give you 2. Will Fuller. Will Fuller is pure upside. He's the most likely got to be Deshaun Watson's number 1 receiver. He's got the rapport, unlike the other 2 new additions, Cobb and Cooks. He's averaged 4.5 catches per game over the last 2 years, even with Hopkins. Averaging 10 plus. He's still shown he can put up huge numbers when called upon. He had a 200-yard game last year, and his median routes run per drop back per game was 95%. So, when he's in there, he'll probably miss games, but he could give you the best 10 weeks, of any guy who plays 10 games that you can get in this range, I think. And then Marquise Brown. He's a guy who just a ton of room for growth. Already has shown his upside right out of the gate. Over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in his first game. Struggled with some injuries, put on some weight. I think that should help get him to even if he loses a tiny bit of speed, I think it should ultimately help. Ton of targets up for grabs in Baltimore. They'll likely become a higher volume offense. They just pure regression to the mean. They have to be, but also Lamar Jackson, after last year saying, I'm going to keep running before the season, this year he said, I want to throw the ball more. So I tend to believe him. A lot of upside from Marquise Brown. Big, very, very talented player. Both him and Fuller, I think, are guys that I'm really excited to have that people are a little kind of iffy on. So I'll grab them every time.
Tags, we talked about, or we haven't talked about, Marquise Brown adding 23 pounds this offseason. For a guy who is that small, and reliant upon speed, that could be kind of nerve-wracking but like Chris mentioned, I think he has speed to spare, right? He might lose some of that top-end explosiveness, but does this worry you at all with Marquise Brown that he's added that much weight?
No, not at all. And the reason I say that is because in college he played at 170 and he dropped down to apparently 153 or 157. The reason this happened is because he was obviously forced to stop training when he had surgery on that Liz Frank injury. So he was basically not able to stay in tip-top shape. Like, he's probably someone that struggles to keep weight on. He doesn't look like a very big framed individual or anything like that. So him getting back up to his playing weight of 170 while he was at Oklahoma is obviously a good thing. But getting to 180, I think it just adds more. I don't want to say the durability, ability to handle a hit, because we saw someone like Deshawn Jackson earlier in his career, playing in the slot a little bit, taking some big hits, and then ultimately just never being a slot receiver after that. So I like Marquise Brown an awful lot. I'm really curious to see if this offense does, follow through and throw the ball a little bit more in 2020. I think they kind of have to. Marquise Brown is definitely someone, Will Fuller too. Those guys are in the same conversation, whereas Will Fuller is the one that you have more health concerns about. I do anyways. But if Will Fuller's in the field, he's getting 8 targets a game. And that's rare, extremely rare to find this late in drafts. And knowing that Deshaun Watson has no chemistry with Randall Cobb or Brandon Cooks, the 2 other starting wide receivers in this offense, he's never played before with David Johnson. David Johnson's not a yards per carry guy that's going to rack up yards per carry in between the tackles. So, yeah, I like Will Fuller if he can stay healthy. Now, there's questions about that, obviously, but it's baked into his cost. If Will Fuller's on the field, you're going to be starting him as your wide receiver 3 every single week.
For sure. All right, the guy that I like in this range, and I'm rising on, DeVante Parker. We saw this past week 2 Dolphins wide receivers opt out for the 2020 NFL season, which we completely support their decision. You ultimately have to take care of yourself first, and so, but that's Albert Wilson and
Allen Hurns.
Allen Hurns. There we go. Thank you. Allen Hurns. So these 2 wide receivers, granted, Allen Hurns probably wasn't going to be much of the game plan with, with Parker and Williams there, and then Wilson being the slot guy. But then additionally, right after that, we found out that Preston Williams might not be 100% to start the season. If that's the case, DeVante Parker is the only guy in this wide receiver core. You're looking at guys like Jakeem Grant, maybe factoring in Mac Hollins from the Philadelphia Eagles. He's not going to be anything of note. Gary Jennings from Seattle. So these guys are not going to be anything that are going to take away targets from DeVante Parker. Parker was outstanding last season, finally, right? We finally saw the breakout happen. And if Ryan Fitzpatrick is starting the season, we've seen the chemistry there. So looking at Parker at ECR wide receiver 25 and wide receiver 26 in ADP, absolute steal right now. I'm all in on DeVante Parker this season. I'm going to have a lot of shares of him. I'll flip it right back around and speed this up. I'm going to go with the guy that I dislike in this range, T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton currently ECR wide receiver 26. As I look at Hilton and what he's done over the past few seasons, he had a phenomenal 2018 season, right? But that was with Andrew Luck. And looking at his durability over that, he hasn't played a full season since 2017. I am terrified of owning Hilton this year in fantasy football, and primarily because we've also already seen the fact that he is having some potential injury issues. Now, it says that he should be fine, he should be ready to start the season, but that scares the crap out of me at wide receiver 26 price tag. Chris, where are you at with T.Y. Hilton? Are you willing to invest in him at that price?
Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. I love Hilton. Like, to me, I think there's a perfect storm, because if you look at his career, and you kind of alluded to it, his 2 most unsuccessful seasons were 2017 and 19. Both of those came with Jacoby Brissett. Phillip Rivers is on the downside of his career, but in terms of his effect on wide receivers, I think he's a lot more like Andrew Luck. I mean, Phillip Rivers is a guy who 7.8 yards per attempt last year, 8.5 the year before. He's still going to be an efficient quarterback. He's just going to throw mind-numbing interceptions. He's almost like Jameis Winston light at this point in his career, but that's great for fans. And he'll chuck it too. He'll chuck it to Hilton, and he's also been a guy that's just locked on to his number 1 receiver. Like, he's turned not only Keenan Allen into what he is, but guys like Denario Alexander with that 1 year, Vincent Jackson for like he's been very good for number 1 guys. So I think that Hilton's price is going to be depressed, and he's one of those guys that, considering the upgrade at quarterback, and again, could he get hurt? Sure, but wide receiver 26, I think he has that top 12 upside, so I'm not scared of him at all. I've actually gotten a lot of him for that exact reason. I love when people are kind of iffy on a guy, but for the guy I don't like is a guy that I did like before I heard that he may not be healthy to start the year for real. And this is Jarvis Landry, who actually had surgery. So
Sure.
That's, to me, that's a little different between Hilton, who's just a lot of guys are going to their hamstrings are going to flare up at random times. And it's not great. Don't get me wrong. It's not great, but Jarvis Landry had surgery, apparently had it late. And this is already an offense that I project to be pretty low volume with Stefanski. Minnesota was, one of the lowest volume pass teams last year. Now Stefanski's running things in Cleveland. So, this could be bad news for Landry. They also paid a lot of money for Austin Hooper. Maybe he'll be more involved than we think. So Landry at 28, ahead of, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, Gallup, Marquise Brown, Fuller. To me, I don't think he has more upside if his health is in question, and maybe even if his health wasn't in question than those guys. So that's a guy that I have closer to 40th given this news than 28.
Sure, I think we're going to see his ADP fall by the time that drafts start happening. Hopefully your drafts are being pushed back. We need more time than ever before to evaluate. But I do expect Landry's to fall quite a bit. All right, Tags, let's speed this up here. Who is your guy? Give us the paragraph summary here.
All right. I mean, T.Y. Hilton was a guy that I'm definitely also fading at his current ECR of 20 is he
26.
So he's being drafted as number 21. He's number 26 in ECR. Well, it's too high for me. So I definitely agree with you there, but mine would be Courtland Sutton, a guy that last year saw 125 targets. That's not a small number. That's actually a pretty good number. And, to know that he played extremely well. Courtland Sutton, by no fault of his own, he finished, obviously, I think it was outside the top 18 wide receivers last year, or the wide receiver 18, despite making miraculous catches, like highlight reel catches. You can go through Courtland Sutton's film from last year and just be like amazed at some of the balls he came down with, yet he still finished as a middle tier wide receiver 2 with 125 targets. Now fast forward, and it's like this defense is going to get a lot better. They're getting Bradley Chubb back there. Like they've added to that defense. They're going to get better. It's going to be one of the better defenses in football. I do believe that with the Broncos. So, and then you have Vic Fangio as the head coach, obviously a defensive-minded coach. They bring in Jerry Jeudy. I mean, the guy is just as talented, if not more, than Courtland Sutton. He's a more well-rounded receiver. I think we could say that. They're different players for sure. Right. They brought in KJ Hamler, a guy that is going to get some work in the slot. He's a guy that deserves some work. They drafted him in the second round. They obviously feel very good about him. They have Noah Fant there. They added Melvin Gordon. All of a sudden, this offense just has an abundance. It might be one of the most talented groups in the entire league. And to know that Drew Lock, we don't know what's going to go on with him, but I don't think it's very likely that Courtland Sutton reaches that 125 target mark again this year. So even if he had increased in efficiency, that's almost going to make up for some of the lack of targets he's going to get. So Courtland Sutton being drafted ahead of where he actually finished last year is just, it's a little disheartening for me. So Courtland Sutton, I won't own any, and it's not because he's not a good football player. He's just not a good value.
The only thing that I can see helping Courtland Sutton is the fact that they brought in Pat Shurmur as the offensive coordinator. And if you look at Shurmur's offenses in New York and previously, very pass happy. So especially, and that's factoring in the fact that they had a running back like Saquon Barkley. They were still very pass happy
too. And I'm curious to see how they. This is where I wish we had preseason. I wish we could see how they align Hamler and Jerry Jeudy, because Jeudy played the slot a lot at Alabama too. He could play all over the place, and you could put Jeudy in any role you want. He'll play.
Yep. Yeah, so that's definitely something to monitor if we get reports coming out of their training camp. Okay, so let's move into the wide receiver 37 to 54 range, and these guys can be classified as flex options. These guys who, we're just going to plug in and we can rotate them in as we need to. So who are the players that we like in this range? And let's, again, we're cutting close on time here, guys, so let's just look at the guys that we like. And if you want to briefly mention the guys that we dislike, we can certainly do that. Tags, let's go to you for both players.
Yeah, Jalen Rager. Love Jalen Rager. He's someone that's going to be targeted relentlessly because he needs to be. Deshawn Jackson, 34 years old. There's some off-the-field stuff with him that's going on that we don't know if he was ever going to get cut or whatnot. Alshon Jeffrey probably going to start on PUP list. We saw someone like Greg Ward legitimately walk into the offense off the street and start performing. Right. Jalen Rager is one of my favorites in this range. He's a guy that I think he's going to lead this team in targets, outside the tight ends, of course. And then a guy I don't like from this range is John Brown. Again, wide receiver 37, that's where he's being drafted right now. I just don't get it. I really don't know why people want to draft him there. It's actually exactly where his ECR is too, wide receiver 37, which is, it's too high. I don't really. Basically, last year he was a wide receiver 3. He never gave you like big numbers, and now you add Stephon Diggs to the offense. It directly impacts John Brown, who is a very good receiver, but Stephon Diggs is just like a similar receiver, but better. So yeah, John Brown is going to be someone that you're not going to want to start every single week, and he's being drafted in that flex conversation.
Right. It hurts, too, because I'm a big John Brown guy. Same. But to have Stephon Diggs there in a low passing volume offense certainly does not help. All right, Chris, let's go to you for you guys real quick here that you like and dislike.
This is such easy answer for me because this is wide receiver starting with 37, which means even in a 12-team league, you should have 3 wide receivers by now. The answers for me are Henry Ruggs at ECR 52 and Mecole Hardman at ECR 53. I would dare rank these guys 37, 38 because it's all about upside after you have your 3 guys. Henry Ruggs, will be if not the #1 overall target, definitely the most targeted receiver for Oakland. He's going to play in the slot, which is actually going to help his weekly consistency. So he's not just even a best ball high upside guy anymore. I think he can actually be consistent. He'll be featured. He's extremely talented. And draft pedigree at wide receiver is important, and he was the first guy drafted. So love him. John Gruden's going to use him. John Gruden uses rookies. We saw that with Jacobs. And then Mecole Hardman, they're talking about taking him. His special teams coach is mad because they're taking him off special teams so he can focus on his role as a receiver. That's all I need to hear. Mecole Hardman, out of every wide receiver that had 40 targets last year, the most fantasy points per target. I wonder why. Oh, yeah, it's because you got Patrick Mahomes, and you got to pay attention to Tyreek and Kelsey and Edwards-Helaire and all those guys, Watkins. So Mecole Hardman is a guy that could sneak into the top 30, getting like 5.5 targets per game, which he very well may get, if not more this year. So all about upside. Those are the two guys. And they're, and by the way, they're super fast.
Yeah, they are. Well, I mean, it's crazy. Henry Ruggs is the guy on my list, too, because I want to bring him up. I'd been kind of at a loss for where to place him and rank him this offseason until we got news yesterday from the offensive coordinator, Greg Olson, that Henry Ruggs is going to be starting in the slot, like you said, Chris. So Las Vegas is going to use this guy heavily. And to put him into the slot, my big concern was Hunter Renfrow. And it's not like Hunter Renfrow is, like a phenomenal talent, but he was so good in that role last year. And now if you're putting Henry Ruggs as a starting slot receiver, that means Hunter Renfrow isn't on the field. Renfro's not playing on the outside, so it's probably going to be Bryan Edwards, who I also really, really like. And then you have Tyrell Williams, probably going to be the field stretcher. Henry Ruggs as a starting slot receiver, going to see a ton of targets. He has the talent to take any slant, any quick pass to the house. I'm all in at his draft price right now. The guy that I do not like is Mike Williams. I've talked about this Chargers offense. The only reason that I would be willing to invest in Mike Williams is if Justin Herbert was the starting quarterback, and even then, I probably would still be very hesitant. I just don't see the upside for Williams in this passing offense with Tyrod Taylor as the quarterback. It's not like Tyrod Taylor is going to be throwing 30 touchdowns in this offense, so they're going to be wanting to keep the ball on the ground. I'm all out on Mike Williams. I don't think he has any upside this season. All right, guys, so now we're at the point of drafts where these guys are absolute shots in the dark. They're going outside the top 55 in ECR, and it's going to be very hard to find players that we dislike in this range, right? Like, it's going to be super nitpicky to say, oh, well, I don't like this player at wide receiver 70, right? The cost to acquire them isn't anything. So let's go with one player that we like in this range. Tags, let's start it off with you first.
Oh, there's so many. It's so hard to narrow down. Can I just name a few players just because I want to?
Sure.
I had 4 names down. I just want to mention Allen Lazard. He's the clear-cut number 2 now. Like, there's no questioning Devin Funchess.
Sure.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling might play the slot, but we know that Geronimo Allison. Most people don't realize that there's like 110 targets gone from this Packers offense, but between Jimmy Graham and Geronimo Allison. Jay Sternberger's on the COVID list. He's not practicing. Obviously, he's not going to be a major part of this offense. Rodgers never targets the tight ends anyways. But Lazard I like. Paris Campbell. One of my favorite late-round picks because you're going to know exactly what you have over the first couple weeks of the season. If he's playing all the snaps and if T.Y. Hilton is still dealing with this hamstring injury, super high upside. John Ross, I will never quit you, John. And then Dede Westbrook. I actually think that Dede Westbrook is the Jamison Crowder of 2020, which means you're not going to be excited to start him every week, but I do think, again, going Jay Gruden there, that's where Jamison Crowder kind of made his name in Washington because Jay Gruden never peppers one player with targets. It's always like a good share between the players. And Dede Westbrook, I don't think people realize he had like 100 targets last year. Like he was heavily used. So I think he's the Jamison Crowder of 2020. If you're looking for a wide receiver 4 or 5 option that you can plug in there in case someone's knocked out of the lineup with COVID or whatever. Those are my late round guys. Yeah,
Westbrook going super, super late. The cost to acquire him isn't anything. Paris Campbell going to be starting in the slot. Should be heavily. We've seen Keenan Allen do great things in the slot with Phillip Rivers as the quarterback. Now, I'm not saying that Campbell's going to have as great of a season as Keenan Allen has had, but he can definitely be a value. Chris, who are your guys, 4 guys, 5 guys, however many you want to talk about?
Yeah, so my strategy in this range is, it sounds like it's a little different from yours, Mike. I'm not looking for like volume in the way that Dede Westbrook or even Paris Campbell may get volume. I'm looking for air yard volume because when I think to myself, how can guys drafted in this range jump guys who are drafted ahead of them and projected ahead of them because they're projected for more receptions, more volume? To me, that shortcut is air yards, right? So I am, instead of Campbell, I am actually more bullish on Michael Pittman. And
there we go.
I could be dead wrong. It could be Campbell, but I think a good season from Pittman compared to a good season from Campbell. Pittman wins every time because Campbell's targets are going to be closer to the line of scrimmage, and he doesn't profile as much of a red zone threat. So I love Pittman. I love Deshawn Jackson. I think Jackson going at, what is he, 60 ECR 60, with Rager at, where's Rager? Let's see, 50. So I don't think there should be that differential. If anything, I think Jackson projects for more targets than Rager just because he's a guy they reacquired. He, word out of Philly, he's going to be the featured guy. I project Jackson to lead them in air yards. I think Rager will be a factor, and he's a great pick too for the same reasons. But Jackson should definitely be in that same conversation. He's ranked way too low. And then Sammy Watkins, I always take a stab at just because of the attachment to Mahomes. But I like Hardman a lot more. I think Hardman's on the way up. Watkins is kind of a possession guy at this point, but still a guy that can do work downfield. Brandon Ayuk, because let's be honest, Deebo Samuel doesn't look like he's going to start the season. They're taking dart throws on Jordan Reed. Like, they're desperate. They drafted this guy in the first round. A lot of upside to establish himself early in the year by the time Deebo comes back. And Denzel Mims, just because I think I could see a scenario where he leads the Jets in air yards. I don't think much of Brashad Perriman. I would rather have Mims, and I would actually rather have Chenault over Westbrook as like a super like a shot in the dark, just because I think he'll be featured. I think he'll beat out Conley and sorry, let me say that. Phone going off in the background. Let me say it again. So I think Chenault will beat out Conley sooner rather than later. And I think Westbrook is another one of those guys that projects for volume, but he's averaging, 11 yards a catch or something like that. His ADOT dipped under 7 last year. Just not a guy that I think even in a great year is really going to give you like a difference making amount of upside. Whereas I think Chenault could be like this like featured guy that gets like, schemed, 6-7 targets a game by the time we're in like week 5. And actually could be that difference maker. So those are some of the guys that I like. Oh, and Miles Boykin, because I think he'll be a every down player with them going away from Hurst. He's the only guy that really profiles as a guy that can play on the outside. So I think he'll play across from Brown. And you got the league MVP, 36 touchdowns last year. Throwing to him, year 2 breakout candidate. That's my super late shot in the dark.
Awesome. All right, well, Michael Pittman Jr. was a guy that was on my list, so I love that call too. I have him up at wide receiver 32, so I really like him and his potential in this offense. Robbie Anderson is the other guy I'll throw out, especially building off of what you said, Chris, with air yards. If we're looking for a guy who's going to get air yards and has the speed to capitalize on it, it's Robbie Anderson. The benefit is that you're drafting him at wide receiver 52, right? You're not depending on him in any way. If I'm wrong, great, just cut him. Pick up another player because this offense wasn't what we projected it to be. The other guy, we're talking about, we've mentioned all 3 now, Baltimore Ravens wide receivers, Devin Duvernay. Super late. He's going outside like the top 300 overall in ADP. He's not even being talked about, but I do want to mention him, this speedy slot receiver out of Texas, now the rookie, and he'll be the slot receiver in this offense. Ravens receiving options saw 19 total touchdowns out of the slot last year. Now, I'm not saying that Duvernay is going to finish with 19. They moved Brown in, they moved Mark Andrews into the slot, but Duvernay absolutely has a talent to take any pass to the house. So he's someone that I absolutely love in this range. All right, guys, that is all we've got for today. Huge thank you to Chris Raybon for coming on and talking wide receivers. Great stuff as usual. Chris, thank you. Absolutely. All right, guys, don't forget about the amazing giveaway that we have going on. Once we reach 7,000 reviews on Apple Podcasts, we're at 6,500 right now. We will be giving away an incredible amount of prizes for one lucky listener. To enter the giveaway, just leave an honest review for our show on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot of that review, and also take a screenshot showing that you subscribe to our YouTube channel to qualify for the bonus prize, and send those to contest@fantasypros.com. Also, don't forget that we're posting amazing content over on Instagram at Fantasy Pros every day. Head over there and check it out, and make sure to hit that follow button. That's going to wrap up this episode, fellas. For Mike Tagliere and Chris Raybon, I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.